September 5th has come and gone, and I'll cut to the chase. I did not reach 50,000 words by September 5th. We're still currently hovering around 40,000 words, and that's where we're going to close the project out. In the week leading up to that big trip that I referenced in my last video, I ended up really needing a break after writing 10,000 words in a week the week prior. And so I did. I took a break and I started working on some other creative projects. And my wife and I went on this big trip for a friend's wedding overseas, and it was incredible, and it was creatively inspiring, and it was beautiful. One part of this trip involved a wedding in a tiny church in a village in Central Europe. And there was Lord of the Rings music on an organ. It just could not have been more creatively inspiring and beautiful and lovely, but it wasn't inspiring me for the summer novel project. Instead, when we returned, I began immediately working on something else. I'll talk more about that project in a little while, but first, let's tie a bow on the summer novel project and talk about it for just a little bit. We're going to cover the main lessons I learned from the summer novel project, what I'm working on next, and a few other items sort of there in between. I'm going to try to keep it organized, but I may jump around. Bear with me. It feels like I've reached the end of the first draft for this summer novel project. There are still chunks of story missing from the second and third acts, for sure. But for this draft, I've exhausted sort of every storyline that I had outlined and everything that I thought of while I was working on this first draft. And if you gave me another 2 months to keep working on it, starting today, I would start from scratch and begin a second draft using everything that I learned from the summer novel project. That's why it feels like the end of the first draft to me, is I feel like I've hit the end of its usability and the end of it being a sort of reliable document. I've learned so much while doing this, both about this story and about writing in general, and I'm very excited to return to this character and to return to this story soon and to write the second draft and to get even further that time. But I'm not going to be doing that immediately. When I returned home, I began working on another project that has lingered in my mind for multiple years. And it's not a novel, and it's not a screenplay, and it's not a pilot. It is a TTRPG, a tabletop role-playing game. In the past few months, as I've been working on the summer novel project, I've also been reading a lot of indie RPGs on the side, like Outcast Silver Raiders and Shadow Dark and Cairn and a few others like that. And they've really expanded my knowledge of what a lean RPG can achieve, especially ones that have like pretty setting specific ideas. That's a different project though. It's a different video, honestly. Not that I'm going to make it, but it would be a different video. And so that's how I've made myself busy in my creative time during the week before grad school started back up. As of this moment, grad school has started back up, and I am writing all kinds of new things for class as well. For my 3 classes, I'm writing a play, another drama pilot, and a bunch of shorter scripts sort of interspersed in between those throughout the term. I'm really excited about all 3 of these projects. I'm going to attempt to keep working on the TTRPG while doing all those 3. So I will be very busy over the next few months with a lot of writing. And I think the summer novel project was invaluable in preparing me for that. I do want to get specific, though, about the things that the summer novel project taught me and the exact kinds of lessons that I'll be carrying forward into my new writing projects. So let's talk specifics. Got it written in my notebook here. Lesson number 1, writing a high volume of words every day drains a lot of energy. This sounds completely obvious, and it is, but I was still taken aback by how quickly that battery depleted for me. It felt like training the exact same muscle every single day. So for me, in this project, I ended up having to splice in rest days pretty liberally some weeks, and that contributed to us not quite getting to 50,000 words. But I know that there's absolutely no way that I would have made it to the finish line if I had made myself stick to writing 5 days a week. I know there are writers that do it. I think I can do that. I just need to build up enough creative endurance to be able to drain that battery that much every day. I hope to get there, but for this summer, I couldn't quite hack doing that. Lesson number 2, maintaining a consistent energy level is difficult, like I said, but the threshold for when I needed a rest day is much further away than I initially thought. There were tons of times where I got exhausted and wanted to quit and thought to myself, like, I burned out, I need to stop, I need a rest day, and I would make myself go a little bit further and further, and I would still be generating good words and good ideas and good drama, sometimes even 1,000 words after when I thought I needed to quit. So your threshold might be further away than you think. Don't be afraid of not listening to that part of your brain that tells you it's time to rest, it's time to break, you can't do this. Sometimes you can. The threshold is very real, and I did hit periods where I absolutely needed to stop writing for a day, or it would have broken my brain. But that threshold is further away than it seems at first blush. Lesson number 3 is habit. Habit is one of the most important tools in your toolkit. There's lots of advice out there on how to build habits, and I'm generally wary of self-help literature in general, but I think there is a lot of good science on habit formation and how you can sort of manipulate it and bend it. For me, what worked is clustering a bunch of small habits around writing, really being consistent about the things that I was doing while I was writing. So that's writing in the same place at that same little desk every day, writing around the same time of day, if you can help it, if your schedule allows for that. I listened to the same playlist every time that I wrote, with a few rare exceptions. I would usually crack open a cold diet soda or have some water on the desk. I would always have a drink near me, and sort of getting that ready beforehand was a habit that I formed. And always bringing my materials to the desk, my little notebook, the iPad, for Spotify, because I was recording on my phone, making sure that I had all of my materials ready and sort of gathering them from wherever they were in the house and bringing them over at the same time every day. That was its own little ritual. So building a lot of little habits to essentially make writing as automatic as possible was a huge factor. Lesson 4, external pressure was huge for me. This is pretty subjective. Not every writer is motivated by the same thing. Our relationship to work and validation is different for each of us. I like to think of myself as somebody who's independent and reserved and doesn't depend on external validation. But when it comes to writing, it really helps. It was incredibly encouraging every time somebody would comment on a video, anytime somebody asked me about it. And those tiny little interactions, while they're small things in the macro, they could turn around my energy for writing for an entire day. So external carrots of that nature were huge for me and made such a difference. And the external stick of posting it on YouTube, which I never would have done even a year ago. I can't promise that I wouldn't have quit earlier, like just full stop quit, if I had been silently doing this by myself. But because I was recording it, because I knew friends and acquaintances were periodically checking on the progress and asking me about it, I couldn't just quit. That external pressure really kept me in check. And it was almost fully artificial. I didn't have anybody telling me to write this. I didn't have a real deadline. I picked a deadline based on when I was going back to school. I picked a pretty arbitrary amount of words I wanted to get done, and the artificial pressure of putting it online, I'm probably underrepresenting how important that was in me getting any of this done. Lesson number 5. So this one might be pretty specific to if you already know your writing process. Specifically, if you're a writer and you already know your relationship to outlining, this will probably make more of a difference. But for this specific project that I used for the summer novel, my problem is that my sequence outline for this version of the novel, where I went in and outlined chapters and events and what I wanted, all of that was unfinished when I started writing the pages. And I told myself I was going to go in and fill it out. But because of the speed at which I had to write the pages, ran out of outline, and that's when I started floundering. That is what killed most of my progress. I went from flying through words to really having to grind out like ideas and really struggle against the pages just to eke out 1,600 words. So if you're writing something that you know is a story you can outline, and it's a story where maybe you have a half-baked outline, but you theoretically know how you want it to go and how you want it to end, you just haven't gotten around to finishing the outline, I recommend finishing the outline. I think if I had all of my sequences mapped out before I dove in, if I had all the chapters mapped out, which in this case I think I could have, I would have made much better progress. And for the parts that I just fully couldn't outline, I would have seen the holes coming way quicker instead of just being stumped when I got there in the pages. So everybody has a different relationship to outlining, but for this instance, where this was not a discovery novel, this was something that I had already had the blueprints for a long time. Writing an outline specific to this version and finishing it would have been crucial. The next one is a classic lesson that if you are a writer who has read books about writing or been in classes about writing, you have probably heard this. I hope you have heard this, and that is write now, edit later. You got to turn off that internal editor. You got to shut down your internal critic and just get the pages done. I didn't have too many problems with this. I felt like I kept on rediscovering how important it was as I went, but I didn't find myself too resistant to this after the first few times. I had to remind myself, hey, shut up, write, quit editing. It's hard to understate how much this helps generate pages and helps sort of prevent the paralysis of indecision. You got to just write words, man. There were so many days where I sat down, I didn't even know how I wanted to begin the scene. I just knew vaguely what I needed to achieve, and I knew what the dialogue was going to look like. But that first paragraph, blah blah blah, I would just write. Protagonist entered the room and did X. The worst sentences that you would never put in the final product. That doesn't matter because this isn't the final product. You are just generating the marble so that you can carve it later. Next, this is the final lesson that I wrote down, and it's actually pretty closely tied to the habit formation one, and that is be intentional about how you cultivate your physical surroundings while you're writing. You know yourself. You know what makes you feel comfortable in a room. You know what makes you work well in a room. For me, that meant I'm going to write at that little writing desk at the same time every day. I'm going to write on my laptop and not my desktop because there's no video games installed on my laptop. Discord's not installed on my laptop. I'm not going to be getting texts from anybody on my laptop. It's a Windows laptop. I wrote looking out that window. I kept the same music every single day. Like I mentioned earlier, I clustered a bunch of routines around getting that little space set up. And I think that was tremendously helpful for me. I think the main point is to find what kind of physical surroundings really align with you and your perception of the work and your headspace as you write every day, and be consistent with that. Be consistent with yourself. You're attempting to make your brain do something really hard, probably several days a week. And I think making it easy on the brain by doing it in the same place every day and clustering habits and just sort of making it as automatic as possible for the brain is going to be good for your writing in the long run. Those are the lessons I wrote down on September 7th. And I think those lessons are the most important things I learned from the summer novel project. This has been a big undertaking, and I am very happy with how it's come out. For all of you who have watched these videos and commented or texted me about it or talked to me about it in real life or checked on my progress, for everyone who's engaged in this in any way, shape, or form, I really can't stress enough how much that genuinely impacted my work on this project. Every comment, every kind word, every question, all of it strongly affected my motivation, the amount of work that I got done, and the amount of times that I excitedly thought about this project every day. So thank you for taking the time to do those things. This has been a meaningful process for me, and I'm very grateful for everyone who has engaged in it with me. This process was also just extremely helpful for writing. Because of that, I will probably do this again. Probably not anytime soon, not with any of the projects that I'm currently working on, but at some point in the future, I do plan on returning to this format or some version of it and chronicling the work as I attempt to write something else. Until then, I hope that whatever you're working on, whether it's writing or gardening or music or whatever your thing is, I hope that it is fruitful, that it is treating you well. Until next time, whenever that is, thanks again, and I'll see you later.